Ever feel like you're being transported to a new world while reading? The couch has disappeared, as has the noise around you. The blanket over your lap is light as a dream. The story is realistic, so realistic you feel as though you could reach out and run your fingers down the dark velveteen drapes covering the bright east-facing windows. And yet, you've a feeling, fleeting as it may be, that something uncanny lurks in the periphery, something not quite natural. Welcome to magical realism. Magical realism is an art form, including a speculative fiction subgenre that blends magic with the mundane. A woodsmith whose carvings come to life and help him run the shop, or a baker who cries chocolate instead of tears and uses it to flavor her confections, and allows fantasy to slip into everyday life. The story itself isn't about the magic, though, and the characters themselves aren't magical. Instead, magical realism stories are about what the magic means for the characters realizing it, how the magic becomes an externalization of internal struggle. Magical realism stories don't spend time concerned about the logic or physics of the magic, only what the magic does in and to the world. At its essence, magical realism is literary fiction with a pinch of fantasy. While Erin Morgenstern's The Night Circus is one of my favorite fantasy stories, it is not and cannot be considered a work of magical realism expressly because the plot needs fantasy creatures and settings to keep the story flowing. However, Maggie Stievater's The Listeners, a new favorite story by a beloved fiction author, is a work of magical realism because while the plot doesn't need the water's magic, the dreamy quality of the historical world would be missing, and June's character would lack a cohesive growth arc without the magic. Using magic to explain or give context to the mundane spans cultures and ages, though the term magical realism is relatively new, first used in the 1940s, fewer than 100 years ago, by Cuban novelist Alejo Carpentier, who still has a major influence on the genre and its modern authors, including Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Isabel Allende, among others. Latin Americans who seamlessly blend fantastic or mythical elements into everyday stories are credited for the origins of magical realism. However, the true basis of magical realism is much older and much more human than you might expect. In fact, you could say that magical realism is the original human storytelling form, pulling from the origins of human cognition and the ability to even conceive fantasy. In his history book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, Dr. Yuval Noah Harari writes, legends, myths, gods, and religions appeared for the first time with the cognitive revolution. Many animals could previously say, "Careful, a lion." Thanks to the cognitive revolution, Homo sapiens acquired the ability to say, "The lion is the guardian spirit of our tribe." This ability to speak about fictions is the most unique feature of sapiens' language. Fiction, specifically magical realism, is the basis of human cognition and even showed up in Greek mythology like the Iliad and in the character of Odysseus, who the Greeks and Romans believed to be a real person and who created extensive stories about him. The name of the subgenre itself gives two major root clues to the elements needed to pull off magical realism in your storytelling: magic and real. Unlike other types of fantasy, magical realism always takes place in our world, the real world, whether that world is historical or contemporary. There is no alternate reality where children attend magic schools or a teenager is whisked via tornado to a magical realm. There are no fairies, vampires, or werewolves in magical realism stories, and there are no deep explanations of how or why the magic works. It's just there, present as a heartbeat and equally as important to sustaining the life of the fictional work. Authors of magical realism take time to create settings that are rich in detail and familiar, places you'd find at historical sites or in history books, ordinary places operated or navigated by ordinary people you can visit today. Because of the real-world settings required in magical realism stories, magical realism as an art form often holds up a socio-political mirror to the world, providing to readers a critique of serious socio-cultural problems. In The Listeners, for example, General Manager June grapples with the idea of luxury and hospitality when the Hotel Avalon is temporarily commandeered by the State Department and filled with detained Axis diplomats during World War II, something that actually happened right after the attack on Pearl Harbor. While the Avalon is a fictional hotel, Maggie Stievater was careful to construct the setting based on historical research of those commandeered hotels at that critical time in American history. When writing your magical realism story, make sure the settings and places are realistic, based on existing structures or structures that existed during the period in which your story is set. While the settings and places in magical realism stories must be recognizable, something extraordinary is also afoot. Perhaps a woman is telekinetic, or readers can see something unexplainable happen, like a poached egg which, when cracked open, reveals a gold bar, or the water talks, but not to just anyone. The magical ability or object or presence is there, but it's unexplained entirely, left to the reader's discovery, imagination, and interpretation, even as the characters take it for granted. Supernatural elements of magical realism alert the reader to the high strangeness of the ordinary, creating a dreamy quality that paints a subjective picture of reality, all while capturing how reality feels rather than how reality is. When writing your magical realism story, choose one magical element to introduce to your reader. Avoid explanation and incorporate the magical element in all the settings and places that matter. Because the magic and magical realism must remain artfully hidden, the writing style of magical realist authors tends to lean toward the saturated side of literary fiction, as opposed to the more sparse style, investing in the rhythm and flavor of language used to reveal the story moment by moment. Authors writing in this subgenre are literary fiction authors at heart, who use magical elements only as needed to externalize an internal conflict or moral quandary the characters face. In The Listeners, June grapples with identity, both hers, the strange and impoverished orphan left in the care of an eccentric hotelier who becomes a hotelier herself, and those of her guests, high-ranking and wealthy enemies of war, many of whom helped, directly or indirectly, in the committing of war crimes. While I don't want to give away the ending of The Listeners for those who have not yet but want to read the book, I'll say that the water becomes an extension of June's will, doing what she felt she could not do as the general manager of such a prestigious hotel, though she desperately wanted to act as a force of good. The flow of language in parts mimics the flow of water as it rushes to consume and fill all available space. My favorite way to research a subgenre is to invest time reading works of that subgenre. Better than following any writing advice article, including mine, reading allows you to absorb literary technique and style naturally, gathering bits of information, including how to pull off storytelling well, as the story reveals itself to you through the writing. Here are some titles and authors to get you started on your magical realism research dig. The Listeners by Maggie Stievater, which is brand new and I've already mentioned in this video. The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslye Walton. The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivey. 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami, Life of Pi by Yann Martel, Eva Luna by Isabel Allende, Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie, Beloved by Toni Morrison, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I'll put the list of books and their authors in the comments below for you so you don't have to try to write them all down. Do you have a favorite magical realism novel? Are you writing a work of magical realism? Share in the comments below and let's bring a dash of magic into the world. Happy writing and reading. P.S. The Best of MetaStellar Year 4 anthology is coming soon and pre-orders are now open. So reserve your copy today using the link in the show description. And if you're ready for accountability and support while you write your novel, fly into the Novel Nest and join a community of authors focused on building creative careers.